For a long time, I thought success was something I was supposed to recognize the moment I saw it. A title, a number, a lifestyle that made sense to other people. I assumed that if I worked hard enough, I'd eventually arrive at a version of life that felt undeniably successful, one that didn't require explanation. But the closer I got to what I thought I wanted, the more disconnected I felt. I was doing things that looked right, things that sounded impressive when said out loud. And yet, in quiet moments late at night or early in the morning before the world woke up, I felt strangely empty. Not ungrateful, just misaligned. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. I had been chasing a definition of success I never consciously chose. It had been handed to me, slowly, subtly, through expectations, comparisons, praise, and fear. Success, I was told, looked like being ahead, earning more, being admired, being busy, being needed, being able to say, "I'm doing well," and have people nod in approval. And for a while, I wanted that approval badly. I didn't question it. I assumed wanting success meant wanting what everyone else wanted. And if I felt restless or unfulfilled, I blamed myself, not the definition. But restlessness is information. It's your inner life saying, "This isn't it." The moment everything shifted wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and almost disappointing. I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. Asterisk. If no one else could see my life, what would success actually look like to me? Asterisk. The answer didn't come immediately. It felt buried, like it had been drowned out by noise for a long time. So I waited, and slowly truths surfaced. Success, I realized, wasn't about being impressive. It was about being at peace with how I spend my days. It wasn't about achievement alone. It was about alignment, about whether my actions reflected my values, even when no one was watching. I noticed how often I felt proud in public, but disappointed in private. How often I chased goals that sounded good but drained me emotionally. How often I confused validation with fulfillment. That's when I understood something important. Success that needs witnesses isn't fully yours. The success that mattered to me felt quieter. It looked like waking up without dread, like trusting myself to follow through, like having enough mental space to think clearly and rest without guilt, like choosing growth without self-betrayal. It wasn't glamorous, and that made me uncomfortable at first, because part of me still wanted applause, still wanted proof, still wanted to feel ahead. Letting go of other people's definitions felt like losing protection. If I wasn't chasing what everyone respected, would my life still matter? That question scared me. But when I sat with it honestly, another truth emerged. I didn't want a life that looked successful but felt heavy. I didn't want to win at something that cost me my health, my curiosity, or my self-respect. I wanted a life I could live inside. Success, for me, started to mean competence over comparison, consistency over intensity, progress I could feel, not just explain. It meant choosing work that challenged me without hollowing me out, relationships that felt safe instead of performative, a pace I could sustain, not just survive. I also realized that my version of success included failure. That surprised me. I used to think success meant avoiding mistakes, staying in control, proving myself right. But the more honest I became, the more I saw that growth, the kind I actually respected, required discomfort, humility, and course correction. Success wasn't never falling. It was learning how to stand back up without losing myself in shame. Another thing became clear. My success didn't need to be permanent. It could evolve. What felt successful at one stage of my life didn't have to define the rest of it. I was allowed to outgrow goals, allowed to change my mind, allowed to want something simpler or something braver later. That permission felt like freedom. I stopped asking, "Does this look successful?" and started asking, "Does this feel honest?" I noticed that the moments I felt most successful were often invisible to others. Saying no when I used to say yes. Choosing rest instead of proving my worth through exhaustion. Finishing something meaningful even if it wasn't perfect or public. Those moments didn't earn praise, but they earned peace. And peace, I learned, is not laziness, it's clarity. Success, to me, became less about arrival and more about direction, about whether my life was moving toward who I wanted to be, not away from myself. I also learned that defining success for myself didn't mean rejecting ambition. It meant refining it. I still wanted to grow, to build, to contribute, but I wanted my ambition to come from curiosity and purpose, not fear and comparison. Fear-based success is loud, it rushes, it demands proof. Purpose-based success is quieter, it endures. Now, when I think about success, I don't picture a moment, I picture a rhythm, days that feel intentional, effort that feels meaningful, rest that feels deserved, progress that compounds quietly. And most importantly, I picture a version of myself I don't need to escape from. If you're listening to this and you feel confused about what success means to you, here's what I've learned. Your definition won't come from looking outward. It will come from listening inward, especially to the parts of you you've been ignoring. Success is not what impresses others. It's what allows you to live with integrity when no one is watching. And once you define it for yourself, even imperfectly, you stop chasing everything. You start choosing. For a long time, I told myself I didn't have enough time. That was my default explanation. Life was busy. Responsibilities were heavy. Days disappeared faster than I could keep up with. It felt true because I was always tired. But tired doesn't always mean productive. One day, I had a strange realization that made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't ignore. I knew exactly what I times said, times mattered to me, but I had no idea where my time was actually going. So I decided to stop guessing. I paid attention, not dramatically, not with guilt, just honestly. And what I saw wasn't flattering. My days were full of intention in theory and avoidance in practice. I talked about wanting growth, focus, health, meaningful work. But when I looked closely, most of my time went to things that required very little of me and gave very little back. I didn't waste entire days. That's the lie we tell ourselves. I lost time in fragments, 10 minutes here, 15 there, a quick check that turned into an hour, a break that quietly replaced effort. It never felt like a decision. That's what made it dangerous. I realized how often I confused urgency with importance. Messages felt important because they demanded immediate attention. Notifications felt important because they were loud. Other people's needs felt important because they were visible. But the things I claimed mattered most, growth, learning, health, purpose, were quiet. They didn't demand. They waited. And because they waited, they were postponed. I remember a night when I sat down and mentally replayed my day, hour by hour. Not what I planned times to do, what I actually did. The truth was uncomfortable. The gap between my values and my behavior was wider than I wanted to admit. I said learning mattered, but I scrolled more than I read. I said health mattered, but I chose convenience over care. I said focus mattered, but I let interruptions shape my day. Nothing I did was terrible, but none of it was aligned. That's when I understood something important. Time doesn't lie. It reveals priorities. Not the ones you talk about, the ones you live. I wasn't failing because I lacked time. I was failing because I lacked awareness. Once I saw where my time was really going, I noticed patterns. I used busyness to avoid depth. I used distraction to avoid discomfort. I filled space to avoid stillness. Stillness scared me because it forced honesty. So I started making small changes. Not dramatic ones, honest ones. Instead of asking, "What do I need to do today?" I asked, "What do I want today to stand for?" That question slowed me down. It forced intention. I didn't try to control every hour. I chose one block of time and protected it. Just one. For the thing I said mattered most. Some days I failed. Some days I succeeded. But the pattern began to shift. What surprised me most wasn't how much time I had, it was how much energy I recovered. When my time aligned with my values, effort felt lighter. Not easier, lighter. I also stopped lying to myself about multitasking. I wasn't multitasking, I was fragmenting my attention, and fragmented attention creates fragmented lives. When I gave something my full attention, even briefly, it felt different, more real, more satisfying. Even rest felt better when it was intentional instead of accidental. Slowly, the gap between what I said mattered and how I lived began to close. Not perfectly, but noticeably. And that gap, that distance between intention and action, is where most of our stress lives. I realized I didn't need more hours, I needed more alignment. Time is the most honest mirror you'll ever have. It reflects what you choose when no one is watching, when nothing is urgent, when comfort is an option. If you're listening to this and you feel like your days are slipping away, I want you to try one thing, not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. Ask where your time really goes. Then ask whether it matches what you say matters. If it doesn't, don't panic. Awareness is the beginning of change. You don't need to redesign your life. You need to redesign one decision at a time. Because when your time aligns with your values, life stops feeling rushed and starts feeling intentional. For most of my life, I didn't doubt that I had potential. I doubted whether I deserved it. That might sound strange, but it shaped everything. People would tell me I was good at certain things. Quick learner, creative, good with words, good with people, good under pressure, and I'd smile and say thank you. But inside, I never fully accepted it. Not because I thought they were lying, but because I knew the truth they didn't see. I wasn't fully applying myself. I was naturally good at things, yes, but I was also naturally skilled at staying just below my real capacity, at doing enough to be praised, but not enough to be exposed, at looking capable without risking the moment where I might discover I wasn't as capable as people assumed. It took me a long time to admit that. I used to think my problem was laziness, or lack of discipline, or bad time management. Those were part of it. But deeper than all of that was fear, quiet, intelligent fear. Because if you're naturally good at something, it becomes part of your identity. And once it's identity, effort feels risky. Trying hard means you might fail publicly. It means you might discover limits. It means you might lose the label you've been living off. So I did what a lot of people do without realizing it. I relied on talent like a shortcut. I waited until the last minute and still delivered something decent. I let pressure do the work that routine should have done. I stayed in environments where I could be the good one without stretching myself too far. I avoided arenas where I'd be a beginner again. From the outside, it looked like confidence. Inside, it was self-protection. The first time I noticed this clearly was during a moment that should have felt like a win. I had done well, people complimented me, the result was good, everything looked fine. But instead of feeling proud, I felt empty, almost annoyed, because I knew I could have done better. And the worst part was that I didn't even try. That's when I realized something painful. Being naturally good at something doesn't feel like a gift if you keep using it as an excuse not to grow. It becomes a cage. So I started asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. What am I good at that I keep half using? Where do I rely on talent to avoid commitment? What part of me do I refuse to test? The answers weren't one clear thing. They were patterns. I was naturally good at understanding people reading the room, noticing what others felt before they said it, but I didn't fully apply it because I avoided conflict. I used my emotional intelligence to keep things smooth, not to be honest. I was naturally good at learning quickly, but I didn't fully apply it because consistency bored me. I loved the early stage when progress is fast and praise comes easily. I disappeared when mastery required repetition. I was naturally good at generating ideas, but I didn't fully apply it because finishing scared me. Starting feels safe. Finishing makes you vulnerable to judgment. So I collected ideas like trophies and avoided execution like it was danger. And maybe the deepest one, I was naturally good at potential. I knew how to look capable. But potential is not a life skill, it's just a possibility. The difference between people who have talent and people who build something meaningful is not talent. It's devotion. It's willingness to be uncomfortable longer than feels normal. That's what I wasn't applying. And the reason wasn't lack of ability. It was a hidden belief I didn't want to face. Asterisk. If I try my hardest and it still isn't enough, what does that say about me? Asterisk. So I stayed in the safer pain of I didn't really try, because that pain is familiar. It protects your identity. It gives you an escape route. But it also steals your future. When I dug deeper, I realized my natural strengths came with natural weaknesses. And those weaknesses weren't random, they were directly attached to the strengths. If you're naturally good at adapting, you can become addicted to flexibility and avoid structure. If you're naturally smart, you can become dependent on last-minute performance and avoid steady effort. If you're naturally creative, you can fall in love with ideas and avoid finishing. If you're naturally empathetic, you can become a people pleaser and avoid boundaries. My strengths weren't failing me. I was misusing them. So I made a shift that changed everything. I stopped treating my gifts as proof of who I was and started treating them as responsibilities. If I'm good at something, I owe it respect. Respect m'impractice. Respect m'inconsistency. Respect means showing up even when it's boring, even when I'm not praised, even when I might fail. That was a hard shift because it removed my excuses. I couldn't hide behind, I'm just not that kind of person. I couldn't hide behind, I work better under pressure. I couldn't hide behind, I'll do it when I feel inspired. I had to face the truth. I was choosing comfort over capacity. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So I started applying myself in small, honest ways, not dramatic reinventions, just proof building. I chose one skill I knew I had and committed to practicing it consistently, not intensely, consistently. I finished small projects instead of dreaming about big ones. I built routines that supported my talent instead of waiting for talent to rescue me. And slowly, something changed inside me. I stopped feeling like an imposter with potential. I started feeling like a person with competence. That's the real upgrade. Potential gets you praised. Competence gets you peace. If you're listening to this and you know deep down that you have strengths you aren't fully using, don't shame yourself. Shame makes you hide. What you need is honesty. Ask yourself, where am I coasting because I'm afraid to commit? What am I avoiding because I don't want to risk failure? What gift have I been treating like decoration instead of responsibility? Your natural talents are not the finish line. They're an invitation. And the moment you start applying yourself not perfectly, but honestly, you stop living in I could, and you finally step into I did. For a long time, I thought progress came from big decisions, big changes, big moments where you finally get serious and everything shifts. But when I looked honestly at my life, nothing big was holding me back. It was the small things, the quiet things, the daily habits that didn't look dangerous, but were decisive. Some of them were moving me forward without much noise. Others were holding me back without asking permission. And the most unsettling part was this: I did both every day. The habits that moved me forward rarely felt dramatic. They didn't announce themselves as growth. They felt ordinary, almost boring, easy to overlook. One of them was starting before I felt ready. Every time I began a task without waiting for the perfect mood, something shifted, not immediately, but internally. I stopped handing control of my life to how I felt that morning. That habit didn't make me motivated. It made me reliable. Another forward habit was finishing small things. Not big projects, small ones, closing a loop, completing a task fully instead of half doing 5 things. Each time I finished something even imperfectly, it gave me momentum. It reduced mental clutter. It made progress feel real instead of theoretical. Choosing consistency over intensity moved me forward more than anything else. On days I did less but showed up anyway, I built trust with myself. That trust mattered more than bursts of effort followed by burnout. Protecting quiet time helped too. Even a few minutes without noise, without scrolling, without distraction, that space gave me clarity. It reminded me what I actually cared about instead of what was demanding attention. These habits didn't change my life overnight. They changed my direction quietly. Then there were the habits that held me back. They didn't feel harmful. They felt comfortable. One of the biggest was checking my phone the moment I felt discomfort. The second, something felt hard, boring, or uncertain. I escaped. I told myself it was a break, but it was avoidance. And avoidance compounds. Another was mistaking planning for progress. I thought about doing things more than I actually did them. I organized, I prepared, I imagined. It felt productive, but it kept me safely distant from failure and growth. Saying yes when I meant no was another quiet habit that drained me, not in dramatic ways, in subtle ones. It scattered my energy. It pulled me away from what mattered. It left me busy, but unfulfilled. There was also the habit of negative self-talk disguised as realism, telling myself I was just being honest when I was actually rehearsing doubt. That habit didn't stop me instantly, but it slowed everything down. And maybe the most dangerous habit of all, postponing the life I wanted until I felt more confident. Confidence never arrived. Action did. What surprised me was how neutral these habits felt in the moment. None of them screamed, "This will ruin you," or "This will save you." They just repeated, and repetition is powerful. I realized that habits don't push you forward or backward dramatically. They vote quietly, daily, for the person you're becoming. Scrolling once doesn't hold you back. Avoiding once doesn't define you, but repeating them does. The same is true for good habits. Starting once doesn't change your life. Showing up once doesn't build confidence. Repeating it does. When I stopped asking, "Is this good or bad?" and started asking, "If I repeat this for a year, where will it take me?" everything became clearer. Some habits lead to calm. Some lead to clarity. Some lead to quiet regret. And none of them feel urgent until time passes. If you're listening to this and you feel stuck, don't look for the dramatic problem. Look for the quiet pattern. Ask yourself, what do I do every day that builds trust with myself? What do I do every day that helps me avoid discomfort? Which habits make me feel calmer later and which only help me escape now? You don't need to fix everything. You don't need perfect routines. You need awareness. Because once you see which habits are moving you forward and which are quietly holding you back, the choice becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. And clarity is where real change begins. For a long time, I told myself I was just being practical, careful, patient. I used reasonable words to describe something much less flattering. Avoidance. Not the obvious kind. Not running away or quitting dramatically. The quiet kind that hides inside logic and timing and "I'll do it later." The kind that lets you stay comfortable while telling yourself you're still trying. What I was avoiding wasn't laziness. It was discomfort. Discomfort has a specific feeling, tight chest, restless thoughts, that urge to distract yourself the moment something matters too much. I felt it whenever I stood close to something that could actually change my life. And instead of facing it, I softened it. I delayed. I prepared. I waited. I avoided starting the thing I cared about most because starting meant exposing myself. It meant risking the possibility that my effort wouldn't match my expectations. That fear didn't shout, it whispered. And because it whispered, I trusted it. I avoided hard conversations, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I felt. Saying it out loud meant things could change. It meant disappointing someone. It meant no longer hiding behind politeness. I avoided committing fully to one path. I kept my options open, telling myself I was flexible. But flexibility can be another word for fear when it prevents you from choosing. If you never commit, you never fully fail, but you never fully succeed either. I avoided finishing things. Starting felt exciting. Finishing felt final. Finishing meant judgment. It meant the world could respond. So I stayed in the safe space of in progress, where potential stays untouched and outcomes can't hurt you. I also avoided resting properly. That one surprised me. Rest requires honesty. It forces you to sit with your thoughts without achievement, to distract you. I kept myself busy not because I loved productivity, but because stillness made me confront questions I wasn't ready to answer. And beneath all of it, deeper than tasks, conversations, or decisions, I was avoiding responsibility for my own direction. Responsibility is scary because once you claim it, excuses lose power. You can't blame timing, people, or circumstances as easily. You have to admit that your life is shaped in large part by what you choose to face and what you choose to avoid. The most uncomfortable truth was this: what I was avoiding wasn't actually dangerous, it just threatened my identity. If I tried and failed, I'd have to update the story I told myself about who I was. If I succeeded, I'd have to live up to it. Both outcomes required growth, and growth demands discomfort. So I stayed in limbo. Safe, capable, unsatisfied. The moment things shifted wasn't when I became brave, it was when I stopped pretending avoidance was neutral. Avoidance has a cost. It costs confidence. It costs clarity. It costs momentum. And it charges interest. I didn't eliminate fear. I didn't suddenly feel ready. I did something smaller and more honest. I named what I was avoiding. Not to shame myself, but to remove its invisibility. Once named, it lost some of its control. I could see it clearly. This isn't logic. This is fear. This isn't timing. This is hesitation. This isn't self-care. This is escape. And then I took one step toward it. Not a leap, a step. One uncomfortable conversation. One imperfect attempt. One finished thing. That step didn't feel heroic. It felt terrifying and grounding at the same time, like stepping into cold water, unpleasant at first, but clarifying. If you're listening to this and something in your life feels heavy, stagnant, or unresolved, ask yourself this gently, honestly. What am I avoiding because it scares me? What would I do if I wasn't trying to protect my image? What discomfort keeps returning because I refuse to face it? Whatever comes up doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. But growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the direction of what you're avoiding. You don't need to stop being afraid. You need to stop letting fear make your decisions. Name the thing, take one step, stay present. That's how you stop running and start moving forward. For a long time, I believed motivation was the key. If I could just feel motivated more often, everything would fall into place. I told myself I worked best when inspired, that I needed the right mood, the right energy, the right moment. And when those things showed up, I really did perform. I moved fast. I felt capable. I felt alive. The problem was how rarely motivation showed up and how quickly it disappeared. I didn't notice the pattern at first. I only noticed the cycle. A burst of energy, a strong start, a few good days. Then resistance, then delay, then guilt. Then waiting again for motivation to return and save me. It felt like I was living at the mercy of my emotions. Some days I'd do incredible work. Other days I couldn't start at all, and the inconsistency started to affect how I saw myself. I stopped trusting my plans because I knew they depended on a feeling I couldn't control. I stopped setting realistic expectations because I never knew which version of me would show up. The motivated one or the tired one. That's when an uncomfortable thought surfaced. Maybe motivation wasn't my strength. Maybe it was my excuse. Because motivation let me off the hook. If I didn't act, I could say I just wasn't feeling it. If I failed to show up, it wasn't a character flaw, it was a mood issue. Motivation made inconsistency feel reasonable. Systems don't offer that comfort. Systems don't care how you feel. They don't ask if you're inspired or confident or ready. They just ask one question: did you show up or not? And that scared me. I realized how much of my identity was tied to time's potential asterisk, to what I could do when I felt good. Systems threatened that identity because they required me to be average sometimes, slow sometimes, bored sometimes. They required humility. Relying on motivation kept me emotionally safe. Relying on consistency exposed me. When I looked honestly at my life, the pattern was obvious. Everything I was proud of came from repetition. Skills I had built, habits I had stuck with, commitments I honored even when I didn't feel like it. Everything I was disappointed in came from waiting. Waiting to feel confident. Waiting to feel inspired. Waiting to feel ready. Motivation felt powerful, but it was unreliable. Consistency felt boring, but it was honest. I also noticed how motivation made me dramatic. When I felt it, I overcommitted. I planned too much. I expected too much from future me. And when the feeling faded, as it always did, I felt like I had failed again. Systems changed that. Systems lowered the emotional stakes. They made progress smaller and steadier. They removed the daily negotiation. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" the question became, "Is this what I do on days like this?" That shift was uncomfortable at first. It felt like I was losing freedom. But what I was really losing was chaos. Consistency didn't make my days exciting. It made them predictable, and predictability gave me peace. I stopped needing motivation to begin. I began, and motivation sometimes followed, but it was no longer in charge. It became a bonus, not a requirement. The hardest part was accepting that consistency wouldn't feel heroic. There were no big emotional highs, no sudden transformations, just quiet progress that only made sense looking backward. But that quiet progress was real. I started trusting myself again, not because I felt motivated, but because I was dependable. I knew what I'd do on bad days, and that mattered more than what I could do on my best ones. If you're listening to this and wondering whether you rely too much on motivation, ask yourself this honestly. What happens when motivation disappears? Do my systems carry me, or do I stop completely? Do I only show up when it feels good? Motivation is a spark. Consistency is the engine. You don't build a life on sparks. You build it on systems that work even when you're tired, distracted, unsure, or afraid. You don't need to kill motivation. You just need to stop depending on it. Build something that survives your moods. That's when progress becomes inevitable. For a long time, I believed my mindset was mine. My thoughts, my moods, my motivation. I assumed they came from inside me, from my personality, from my discipline, from how strong or weak I was on a given day. I didn't realize how much of my inner world was being shaped quietly, constantly, by what I consumed and who I stayed around. It wasn't obvious at first. That's the dangerous part. Influence rarely announces itself. It blends in. I started noticing it on days when nothing had technically gone wrong, yet I felt anxious, restless, or unmotivated. I hadn't failed. I hadn't been criticized. But my mind felt heavy, scattered, tense, and I couldn't explain why. So I paid attention. I noticed how my mindset shifted after certain conversations. How some people left me feeling smaller, more doubtful, more rushed, without ever saying anything cruel. How other people, without giving advice or motivation, made me feel calmer, clearer, more capable just by being around them. Energy transfers whether you believe in it or not. The same thing happened with content. What I watched, read, and scrolled through didn't just pass through my mind, it stayed. Not as memories, but as assumptions about what's normal, about what's urgent, about who I should be. When I consumed content built on outrage, comparison, or constant urgency, my mind mirrored it. I became reactive, impatient, easily irritated. Everything felt like it needed immediate attention, even things that didn't matter. When I consumed content built on depth, reflection, or learning, my pace changed. My thoughts slowed. I became more intentional. The same problems existed, but they felt manageable instead of overwhelming. Nothing about my circumstances had changed, only my inputs. I realized something uncomfortable. My mindset wasn't fragile, it was impressionable. And so was my behavior. When I surrounded myself with people who complained constantly, I complained more. When I listened to people who spoke cynically about effort, I became hesitant to try. When I consumed content that glorified hustle without rest, I felt guilty for slowing down even when I needed it. None of this happened consciously. That's what makes it powerful. You don't wake up one day and decide to be more anxious, more distracted, more doubtful. You absorb it, gradually, quietly, through repetition. The same was true in the other direction. When I spent time around people who took responsibility for their lives, I found myself doing the same without trying. When I listened to voices that emphasized patience and long-term thinking, I stopped panicking about short-term discomfort. I didn't need motivation. I needed better surroundings. That's when I understood something fundamental. Environment beats intention. You can have the best goals in the world, but if your environment constantly reinforces opposite values, you will struggle not because you're weak, but because you're human. Your brain adapts to what it sees most. If you're surrounded by distraction, you'll become distracted. If you're surrounded by urgency, you'll live in stress. If you're surrounded by comparison, you'll feel behind. Not because you choose to, but because your nervous system learns what to expect. I also noticed how subtle comparison crept in through content. Not blatant envy, but quiet dissatisfaction. Watching other people's highlights made my own progress feel slower, smaller, less impressive. Even when I was doing well, I felt behind. That mindset affected my behavior more than I realized. I rushed things, I skipped steps, I chased validation instead of mastery, I lost patience with my own process. And none of it felt like comparison in the moment. It felt like being informed. The shift came when I stopped asking, "Is this entertaining?" and started asking, "Who does this turn me into?" After certain content, did I feel clearer or noisier? After certain people, did I feel grounded or tense? Did this environment support the version of me I was trying to build or constantly pull me away from it? Those questions changed what I allowed into my life. I didn't cut everyone off. I didn't disappear from the world. I just became selective. I limited how much chaos I consumed. I chose depth over volume. I spent more time around people who lived intentionally, even if they were quieter, less exciting, less dramatic. And slowly, my mindset changed without effort. Not because I tried harder, but because I stopped fighting my environment. My behavior followed. I focused longer. I reacted less. I doubted myself less often. Not perfectly, but noticeably. That's when I truly understood. Your mindset is not just an internal skill, it's a response to what you repeatedly expose yourself to. If you want to change how you think, don't start with willpower. Start with inputs. Change the conversations you normalize. Change the content you consume before bed. Change who has access to your attention. You don't need a new personality. You need a supportive environment. Because over time, what surrounds you becomes what shapes you, and what shapes you becomes how you live. For a long time, I thought energy was something you either had or didn't. Some days I felt sharp and focused. Other days I felt heavy, distracted, exhausted before the day even really started. I blamed sleep, workload, stress, anything external that felt reasonable. What I didn't realize was that my energy wasn't random. It was being spent and refilled constantly by the choices I made without noticing. The draining didn't come from big disasters, it came from quiet leaks. One of the biggest drains was unresolved things. tasks I kept postponing, messages I meant to reply to, decisions I avoided because they felt uncomfortable. Each one sat in the back of my mind like a background app, quietly consuming power. I didn't feel them individually, but together they exhausted me. Another drain was context switching, jumping between tasks, tabs, conversations and thoughts. Every switch felt small, but the mental cost added up. By midday, my brain felt fried even though I hadn't done anything deeply challenging. People drained me too, but not in the obvious way. It wasn't arguments or conflict. It was constant surface-level interaction, being on all the time, responding quickly, performing attentiveness without presence. That kind of social energy drain didn't feel dramatic, it felt normal, but it left me depleted. Negative self-talk was another silent drain. Not loud self-hatred, quiet doubt, questioning every decision, replaying conversations, mentally correcting myself long after the moment had passed. That internal noise consumed more energy than actual work ever did. And maybe the most draining habit of all, resisting reality. Fighting how things were instead of dealing with them. Wishing I felt different before starting, complaining internally instead of adjusting externally. Resistance is exhausting. Acceptance, even of hard things, costs far less energy. Then I started noticing what gave me energy. Not excitement, not hype, real energy, the kind that lasts. Clarity gave me energy, knowing exactly what I needed to do next, removed mental friction. When I decided in advance instead of negotiating all day, I felt lighter. Progress gave me energy. Not big wins, small completions. Finishing one task fully, closing one loop, that sense of done restored more energy than a break ever did. Quiet gave me energy too. Not silence as in isolation, but moments without input. No scrolling, no noise, no consumption, just space to think or not think at all. Even a few minutes of that reset me more than I expected. Alignment was a huge one. When my actions matched what I said mattered, effort felt lighter. I could work longer without feeling drained. When I spent time on things that conflicted with my values, even easy tasks felt heavy. Movement gave me energy, not intense workouts, just moving my body enough to break stagnation. Sitting too long drained me more than physical effort ever did. And surprisingly, boundaries gave me energy. Saying no, ending things on time, protecting focus. Every boundary I set felt uncomfortable at first, but energizing afterward. I wasn't scattered. I wasn't pulled in 10 directions. I had space. The biggest realization was this. Energy isn't something you wait for. It's something you manage. Draining habits often feel easier in the moment, but cost you later. Energizing habits often feel harder up front, but pay you back. Once I saw that, my days made more sense. When I felt exhausted, I stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What am I leaking energy into?" When I felt energized, I paid attention not to repeat the feeling, but to repeat the behavior. If you're listening to this and you feel tired more often than you think you should, don't assume you're broken. Look at the quiet drains, unfinished tasks, constant distraction, people-pleasing, internal criticism, avoidance. And then look for the quiet refills, clarity, completion, stillness, alignment, boundaries. Your energy is honest. It responds to how you live, not how you wish you lived. And when you start protecting it, not aggressively, but intentionally, your days stop feeling like something you survive. They start feeling like something you can actually live inside. For a long time, I thought the next level of my life required more effort, more grinding, more pushing, more intensity. I believed that if I just worked harder, stayed busier, or waited for the right opportunity, I'd eventually arrive somewhere better. But when I looked honestly at my life, I realized something uncomfortable. Effort wasn't the problem. Skill was. Not technical skill, not talent, life skills, the invisible ones that quietly separate people who grow from people who stay stuck, even when they're capable. The next level didn't require a new personality, it required upgrades. The first skill I needed was asterisk, asterisk, self-honesty, asterisk, asterisk. Not the dramatic kind where you criticize yourself, but the quiet kind where you stop lying about how focused you are, lying about how much effort you're giving, lying about what you're avoiding. I couldn't move forward while protecting my ego. Growth demanded accuracy, seeing things as they are, not as I wish they were. The second skill was asterisk. Asterisk decision-making under discomfort, asterisk, asterisk. At my current level, I made decisions when things felt clear. At the next level, decisions needed to be made when things felt uncertain, uncomfortable, or incomplete. Waiting for clarity kept me safe but stagnant. People don't level up because they know more. They level up because they decide sooner and adjust faster. Another skill I had to build was asterisk. Asterisk consistency without excitement, asterisk, asterisk. I already knew how to show up when I felt motivated. What I lacked was the ability to show up when things felt boring, slow, or unrewarding. The next level required me to detach action from mood. Consistency is a skill, and like any skill, it's trained, not felt. Then there was asterisk, asterisk, focus management, asterisk, asterisk. Not time management focus. The ability to stay with one thing long enough for it to matter. The next level didn't demand more hours. It demanded fewer distractions. I had to learn how to protect my attention like it was valuable because it is. Without focus, talent leaks. Another skill I underestimated was asterisk, asterisk, emotional regulation. Asterisk, asterisk. At my current level, emotion controlled my behavior. Stress made me reactive. Fear made me hesitate. Doubt made me quit early. The next level required me to feel emotions fully without letting them drive decisions. Emotional strength isn't suppression. It's staying present without spiraling. I also needed asterisk, asterisk, boundary setting, asterisk, asterisk. The ability to say no without over-explaining. To protect energy without guilt, to stop confusing availability with value. The next level required fewer people having access to my time and more intention behind where it went. Without boundaries, growth gets diluted. Then came asterisk, asterisk, learning how to finish asterisk, asterisk. Starting was never my problem. Finishing was. Completing things requires tolerance for judgment, imperfection, and boredom. The next level demanded that I close loops, deliver results, and let things be seen even when they weren't perfect. Progress only compounds when things are finished. Another skill was asterisk. Asterisk, long-term thinking. Asterisk, asterisk. At my current level, I optimized for comfort. At the next level, I had to optimize for direction, making choices today that future me would thank me for even when present me resisted. This meant choosing effort now over regret later. I also needed asterisk. Asterisk, the skill of recovery. Asterisk, asterisk. Not grinding endlessly, knowing how to rest properly, how to reset without quitting, how to recover from failure without spiraling. The next level wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up without drama. Resilience is a skill, not a personality trait. And finally, the most important one, asterisk, asterisk, self-trust, asterisk, asterisk. Not confidence, trust. Trust that I'll do what I say. Trust that I can handle discomfort. Trust that I won't abandon myself when things get hard. The next level of life isn't built on talent, it's built on reliability. Once I saw this clearly, everything changed. I stopped asking, "What do I need to do next?" and started asking, "Who do I need to become next?" Skills compound, circumstances don't. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're on the edge of something but can't quite break through, don't assume you need more pressure or more motivation. You likely need better skills. Skills that help you decide. Skills that help you focus. Skills that help you regulate, commit, and recover. Build those, and the next level won't feel like a leap. It will feel like the natural place you were always meant to reach. For a long time, I thought the way I saw myself was just accurate, neutral, honest. I didn't question it. I assumed my inner voice was simply telling me the truth. But eventually, I started noticing how often that voice spoke and how rarely it helped. It wasn't cruel in an obvious way. It didn't shout insults. It didn't tear me down dramatically. It sounded reasonable, calm, familiar. That made it harder to challenge. It said things like, "That's just not you. You're better when you feel confident. Maybe wait until you're more prepared. You always struggle with this." Nothing harsh, nothing aggressive, just limiting. The way I saw myself was shaped less by who I actually was and more by who I had times repeatedly told myself times I was. Over time, that story hardened into identity. I saw myself as capable but inconsistent, smart but scattered, full of potential, but somehow always behind. Those labels felt descriptive, not damaging, until I realized how much they influenced my behavior. If I believed I was inconsistent, why would I trust myself with long-term goals? If I believed I struggled with focus, why would I even try to sustain it? If I believed I needed motivation to function, why would I act without it? My self-image quietly set my limits, and my inner voice enforced them. I started paying attention to that voice during moments of challenge. Whenever I felt resistance, it showed up not to encourage me, but to explain why stopping made sense. It protected me from discomfort by shrinking my expectations. It didn't say, "You can't do this." It said, "You don't have to do this times right now, asterisk." Ah, that was the problem. The voice wasn't trying to destroy me, it was trying to keep me safe. Safe from embarrassment, safe from failure, safe from the risk of finding out what would happen if I actually tried fully. But safety isn't growth. The most uncomfortable realization was this: the way I saw myself wasn't fixed. It was time's trained asterisk. Every time I quit early, my inner voice learned a pattern. Every time I avoided discomfort, it updated the story. Every time I said, "That's just how I am," it took notes. My inner voice wasn't truth, it was memory. That changed everything. I realized that if my inner voice had been shaped by past behavior, it could be reshaped by future behavior too. But not through affirmations, not through pretending, through evidence. I noticed that on days when I showed up despite doubt, my inner voice softened. On days when I kept small promises, it became quieter, not more positive, more neutral, less controlling. The voice didn't need to be silenced. It needed to be retrained. I also saw how often I confused self-awareness with self-criticism. I thought being hard on myself meant I was being honest. In reality, I was rehearsing limitations. I was narrating my life in a way that kept me predictable. Growth requires a different kind of inner voice. Not one that lies. Not one that pressures. One that stays grounded when things get uncomfortable. Instead of, "I always mess this up," it learned to say, "This is hard and I'm staying." Instead of, "I'm not that kind of person," it learned to say, "I'm practicing becoming." Instead of, "I'll start when I feel ready," it learned to say, "Ready comes after starting." The way I saw myself began to change, not because I thought differently, but because I acted differently long enough to believe it. Self-image is built from proof. If you keep proving to yourself that you quit when it's uncomfortable, your inner voice will remind you of that. If you start proving quietly, repeatedly that you can stay, your inner voice adapts. It has no choice. So when I ask myself now whether my inner voice helps or limits my growth, the answer depends on one thing: who's training it? Because your inner voice will always justify your past, but it can learn to support your future. If you're listening to this and you feel stuck in a loop of self-doubt or hesitation, don't try to argue with your inner voice. Don't try to silence it or replace it with forced positivity. Outgrow it. Show it something new. Keep one small promise. Stay through one uncomfortable moment. Finish one thing you'd normally abandon. Let your actions teach your mind who you are becoming. The way you see yourself is not who you are. It's a reflection of what you've practiced. And the moment you change the practice even slightly, your inner voice will follow. For a long time, I thought self-evaluation meant judging myself, like standing in front of a mirror and listing everything I did wrong. I'd call it being honest, but it usually left me feeling heavier, not clearer. Then I realized something important. If self-evaluation only produces shame, it isn't evaluation, it's punishment. What I needed was a framework, a step-by-step way to look at my life without lying to myself and without destroying myself. Something I could repeat weekly, monthly, whenever I felt stuck to get clarity and make adjustments. So I built one. Not perfect, but honest. and repeatable. The first step is asterisk, asterisk stillness, asterisk, asterisk. Before you evaluate anything, you need to slow down enough to see it. If you try to reflect while your mind is noisy, you'll confuse stress with truth. So I start with 10 minutes of silence. No phone, no music, just breathing and letting my thoughts settle. At first, it feels uncomfortable. That's how I know it's working. The second step is asterisk. Asterisk a factual recap. Asterisk, asterisk. Not how I felt, not excuses, facts. I ask, what did I actually do this week? What did I finish? What did I avoid? Where did my time go? I write it down like a neutral observer. This matters because the mind rewrites history. If I don't capture facts, I'll evaluate myself based on emotion. The third step is asterisk, asterisk energy, tracking asterisk, asterisk. I look back and ask, what drained me most? What gave me energy? Which days felt heavy and why? Which moments felt peaceful and why? This step is underrated. Energy is a truth source. It reveals what fits me and what silently costs me. The fourth step is asterisk, asterisk, alignment check, asterisk, asterisk. This is the heart of it. I choose 3 values I claim matter to me, like health, learning, relationships, discipline, peace, creativity, faith, whatever is true, and I ask one uncomfortable question. Did my week reflect these values? Not in my thoughts, in my actions. Because time and behavior are the most honest data. If there's misalignment, I don't shame myself. I just label it. This is where I drifted. The 5th step is asterisk, asterisk, the pattern question, asterisk, asterisk. I ask, what repeated? What repeated thoughts showed up? What repeated habits held me back? What repeated situations triggered me? What repeated excuse did I use? This step helps me stop treating each failure like it's new. Most struggles are patterns wearing different outfits. The 6th step is asterisk, asterisk responsibility without blame, asterisk, asterisk. I ask, what part of this is mine? Not to attack myself, to reclaim power. Because if I can't locate my responsibility, I can't change anything. This step is not about guilt, it's about ownership. The 7th step is asterisk, asterisk, one root cause, asterisk, asterisk. Instead of fixing everything, I find the one thing underneath most of it. Sometimes it's sleep. Sometimes it's lack of structure. Sometimes it's fear of failure. Sometimes it's people-pleasing. Sometimes it's excessive scrolling. Sometimes it's unresolved stress. I pick the root cause that, if improved, would improve multiple areas. The 8th step is asterisk, asterisk, one decision, asterisk, asterisk. I don't make 10 promises. I make one clear decision for the next week. Something measurable, something small enough to keep on hard days. Examples. I will plan tomorrow tonight for 5 minutes. I will do one uninterrupted focus block daily. I will stop scrolling after a certain time. I will move my body for 10 minutes each morning. I will finish one task before starting another. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency. The 9th step is asterisk, asterisk, a pre-commitment plan asterisk asterisk. This is where most people fail. They decide what they'll do, but not what they'll do when they times don't feel like it asterisk. So I ask, what will I do when motivation is low? And I choose a minimum version of the habit. If I count do 60 minutes I do 10. If I can't write a page, I write a paragraph. If I can't do the workout, I go for a walk. Minimum versions keep the identity alive. The 10th step is asterisk, asterisk review and reset asterisk asterisk. At the end of the next week, I repeat the process briefly and ask, did I keep my one decision? If yes, what made it work? If no, what blocked me? What's the adjustment? No shame, only feedback. That's the framework. Stillness, facts, energy, alignment, patterns, responsibility, root cause, one decision, minimum plan, review. Over time, it does something powerful. It turns self-evaluation into self-leadership. Because the point isn't to become someone who never struggles. It's to become someone who notices sooner, adjusts faster, and doesn't abandon themselves. If you want to know where you truly are, don't ask your emotions. Ask your patterns. And if you want to change your life, don't try to fix everything. Evaluate honestly. Choose one shift and repeat. That's how growth stops being a mood and becomes a method. For a long time, I believed self-improvement had to feel dramatic, like a reset, a bold declaration, a version of myself that suddenly woke up disciplined, confident, and unstoppable. Every time I tried to change that way, I burned out just as fast as I started. What finally worked wasn't intensity. It was structure. A 30-day window small enough to feel realistic, long enough to feel meaningful. Not a challenge to impress myself, but a container to practice becoming someone I could trust. This isn't a perfect plan, it's a human one, built for real days, bad moods, and imperfect follow-through. Here's how I'd live the next 30 days if I wanted real change, not hype. The first 7 days are about asterisk, asterisk awareness, not action, asterisk, asterisk. Most people fail because they try to fix a life they don't understand yet. So, for the first week, I don't try to optimize, I observe. Each day, I ask 3 questions. What did I spend my time on today? What drained my energy? What gave me energy? I don't judge the answers. I write them down honestly. This week is about removing self-deception. Because you can't change patterns you refuse to see. I also add one grounding habit. I wake up and don't touch my phone for the first 10 minutes. That's it. Not to be productive, to interrupt autopilot. To remind myself that I decide how the day begins. By the end of week 1, clarity replaces confusion. I know my leaks. I know my triggers. I know where my life is actually going. The second 7 days are about asterisk, asterisk structure, not motivation, asterisk, asterisk. This is where change usually scares people, because structure removes excuses. I choose 3 non-negotiables. 1 focus block daily, even 20 minutes counts. 1 physical movement habit, walk, stretch, anything. 1 intentional shutdown at night, no scrolling past a set time. Not perfect, just consistent. I stop asking, do I feel like it? I start asking, what does someone who respects themselves do here? Some days feel boring. Some days feel hard. That's the point. Discipline isn't intensity, it's repetition. I also reduce inputs. Less mindless content, less comparison, less noise, not forever, just enough to hear myself think again. By the end of week 2, something shifts internally. I feel calmer not because life is easier, but because it's more predictable. I trust myself more. The third 7 days are about asterisk. Asterisk identity, not outcomes, asterisk, asterisk. This is where self-improvement becomes real. I stop focusing on results and start watching who I'm becoming. Each day I ask, what kind of person did my actions support today? What promise did I keep to myself? Where did I choose comfort over growth? I practice finishing things, small things, unimpressive things. Completion builds identity faster than ambition ever will. I also practice one uncomfortable behavior I've been avoiding. A hard conversation, a delayed task, a boundary, a decisión, just one, repeated. Avoidance keeps you stuck. Facing one fear repeatedly changes who you are. By the end of week 3, I don't feel transformed. I feel grounded, less dramatic, more solid. The final days, days 22 to 30, are about asterisk, asterisk integration, not expansion, asterisk, asterisk. This is where most people sabotage progress by adding more. I do the opposite. I ask, what worked this month? What felt sustainable? What drained me even though it looked productive? I remove one habit that doesn't align with who I want to be, even if it feels comfortable. I double down on one habit that quietly improved my life. I also design my bad day plan. What do I do when I'm tired? What's the minimum version of my habits? How do I recover without quitting? This matters more than good days. By day 30, my life doesn't look unrecognizable, but it feels different. Quieter, more intentional, less chaotic. I don't rely on motivation anymore. I rely on systems. I don't chase confidence. I build trust. I don't need a restart. I have a direction. And that's the real win. If you're listening to this and thinking 30 days won't change everything, you're right. But it can change asterisk, asterisk, how you treat yourself, asterisk, asterisk. And once that changes, everything else follows. You don't need a new life. You need a month of honesty, structure, and consistency. 30 days. Not to become perfect, but to become someone who doesn't abandon themselves. That's how self-improvement stops being a phase and starts becoming who you are.